وإني لا أخاطب أخواتي المؤمنات بأن يتقين الله في أزواجهن وأن يحسن تبعلهن لأزواجهن وأن يتقربن إلى الله بالإحسان إلى الزوج وطاعة الزوج في غير معصية الله ومسامحته على الغلط، فإن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال للنساء: تصدقن فإني رأيتكن أكثر أهل النار. قيل: لماذا يا رسول الله؟ قال: لأنهن يكفرن. قيل: يكفرن بالله؟ قال: لا، يكفرن العشير. لو أحسنت إلى إحداهن العمر كله ثم رأت منك شيئا قالت: ما رأيت منك خيرا قط. فما هذه الصفة في المؤمنة الطيبة المستقيمة؟ بل إن هذا من أسباب دخول النار. فعلى المرأة المسلمة أن تفرح بنعم الله عز وجل عليها بهذا الزوج وبإحسان الزوج، وأن تشكره على هذا، وأن لا تكفره إذا أساء، بل تصبر على ذلك حتى تكون من أهل الجنة وتسلم من النار.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So I really enjoyed this segment from the Noble Sheikh, and to excel in being good wives is a wonderful thing to think about. Yet so many liberal feminist hijabis on Instagram really just take a lot of time to always make the woman the victim and the men these like evil perpetrators, sort of blackpilling, for lack of a better word, women upon marriage. And he mentioned that, if I have some notes here that I'm consulting, that I wrote down, that if you want to seek nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be good to your husband. And how what he calls good is so important, because a woman will say, well, this is good according to me, but she never really asks her husband what he thinks is good. And you'll see feminists often say, we don't care what men think, we don't care what men want. And then a lot of those women are lesbians, and if you look at the lesbian divorce rate, it's higher, last time I checked, than heterosexual couples. And if you look at the domestic violence rate amongst lesbians. So that's something to consider when you're taking advice from people, because if these women are divorced and then they decided to be bisexuals or lesbians, and they're not really trying to get remarried or trying to help you stay married, but they're just trying to give you any excuse to divorce, you really got to be careful. And so when the Sheikh mentions to excel in being good wives, this can make so many broken, bitter, resentful, females rage. And this is quite sad, because you'll see women demand, men do this, men should do that, blah, 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 blah. They have the standard upon standard upon standard, and it's always changing. It's always more demanding. It's always me, I. I mean, the selfishness of some women and the myopic view that the world revolves around them, this main character energy, is quite repulsive. And he mentioned pardoning your husband for his mistakes. And this is so important, because so many women make mistakes. And when a man brings it up, they might lash out at him, point out something he did 2 years ago that doesn't even hold to the situation. It's irrelevant, but they always go on the defensive instead of, shutting their mouth and listening to his complaints and what he needs, what he wants. And when he's apologizing, they're not really ready to accept it. They kind of want him to grovel. And forgiveness is something very important that wives should do, but it's very difficult for some women. And he mentions, ungrateful women in hell, and I was thinking about fickleness. So many women are quite fickle, and it's sad because we've lost the art of patience. And if you're going to be a wife with a long marriage, you're going to have to learn patience. And there are some times where you can check out mentally for a while, for just to maintain your own inner peace. But that doesn't mean you entirely give up, that you totally check out of the relationship and it just goes off the rails and you're just not putting in anymore. you know, you always can come to the table again and try to work things through. It's quite sad how many women want to easily divorce because they had a bad argument, or he did something wrong. Or he has a bad habit that he hasn't fixed. You got to really work with each other. And because some women have money, they think that the kids don't really necessarily need their dad, so it's okay to divorce a man for simple mistakes, you know, because she can afford to pay the rent on her own, totally ignoring the statistics that show what happens in fatherless homes. And also the rates at which stepdads are quite more dangerous than biological fathers. There's so much you can look at, but women often don't like to hear that. Feminists don't ever want to hear that a man is needed. They want to tell you to decenter men, and they have a bad divorce, a bad breakup, and they're nihilistic and cynical forever, and then they just are envious of happy marriages, and they don't ever want to face the black mirror and say, I contributed to my failed marriage. I was stubborn. I was bullheaded. I was conceited. I made countless mistakes. I was arrogant and ignorant. They won't do that. Okay? And so, if you're able to pardon someone for their mistakes, you have that sort of charity and mercy within your relationship. And I think that's important. Because there will come a time where you're going to have to look over mistakes if you want to keep that man. And if you're really fickle and trivial, you're never really going to have a man. And then when you're miserable and alone and struggling with addiction and isolation, and your girlfriends are not this magical sisterhood that you thought they'd be, they're kind of off living their lives and left you in the lurch, you have no one to blame but yourself. So you got to be really careful. Women will often sabotage your marriage. And you'd be surprised what you can work through and what time can heal. So keep that in mind, okay? There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a good wife. Don't let the feminists call you a pick-me-sha. You know, they have all these funny terms. And you just kind of got to sit back and be like, why are you so threatened by women encouraging other women to sleep with their husbands, to cook healthy meals for their husband, to give him surprise intimacy relations, to give him peace of mind? Why is that so infuriating to you? And you often come to realize a lot of these occultic women, their men may pay all the bills and stuff, but they often resent those men because of how whipped they are to them. They don't really respect them as men, and they lead the relationship. So there's a sort of demonic dominatrix vibe going on with these vampiric, snarky, entitled women. And those are not the ones who have a happy marriage because they resent their husbands. They just like punking their husbands for other women online. And I followed a lot of different accounts and watched what these women write, the patterns of their lives. I've archived so many of their takes on my blog. Go ahead and join it. I shared some on Instagram and on the YouTubes. And you can kind of just see how their life choices don't really pan out that well. And no matter what you do, you're going to have suffering in life. No matter what. Yet, I think it's so important that you practice forgiveness. And that you want to be a good wife. And a good wife is, you know, not someone who is catty, combative, putting her husband down, punking him, shaming him, mocking him, gossiping about him, putting him on blast. And if you're cold in the marriage bed and you make all these sorts of excuses why your mood swing is preventing you from revving your engine, well, don't be surprised later, you know? And a lot of women say they'll divorce if their husband decides to get a second, third, fourth wife. And maybe if you just were not ruled by jealousy and you didn't think the world had to revolve around your whims and desires and your ever-changing emotions, you could probably learn to just deal with it and focus on other things in life. because you're never going to make your husband have just eyes for you. Whether he goes in the shower and handles it and thinks about his coworker, whether he has secret accounts that he looks at thirst traps, or he goes on X and sees those videos which are everywhere and you can just search them by keyword. No matter what it is, you're never really going to stop him and prevent him. And you can't attach your self-worth and your self-esteem and your happiness to someone else's actions. You're not really empowered if you do that. And so when you forgive, you often heal. Doesn't mean you necessarily forget. You don't keep it in your mind like a bank, like an ammunition bank to use later on to win arguments. But you have to be able to know how to process things and keep it flowing. You forgive your coworkers, you forgive your bosses because you want that paycheck, but yet people have like a couple fights and then they're just ready to quit. And then these women have a hard time finding a man who wants to pay for them, and they're at work 40, 50 hours a week. They're miserable when they could have just forgiven him, stayed married, and been a housewife, and had a lot more peace and tranquility. But now they're grinding out at work, don't see their kids, a nanny's and a daycare is raising their kids. They look tired and drawn out, so men aren't really flowing with them. They have a more masculine, aggressive energy from working all the time. They sort of lost that feminist charm. I mean, not that feminist charm, that feminine charm. And they look just like butter scraped over too much bread. They look pale and gray. They don't look very happy. All because they couldn't get over an argument and decided to just break up. Something to think about. The Iddah waiting period in Islam, the 3-month period. I know that there's some different waiting periods for different circumstances. Like if you're pregnant, you give birth, that's your Iddah period's done. But my point is that there's a waiting period for reconciliation. And reconciliation is very important in Islam for couples. And having someone try to help you work things out is so important. And women are quite frantic, fickle, and emotional, and they'll often throw away a relationship because they just can't see what they did wrong, and they can't practice forgiveness, and they always want things their way. And that's why we have to check ourselves and be careful who we listen to. Okay? So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a good wife, and see what your husband thinks a good wife is. And don't automatically just expect him to do everything you want, and then you're like, nope, I'm not going to cook for you. I'm not going to clean. I'm not saying you can't split chores, but what I'm saying is, clean up after yourself. If he tells you, don't dress like this, or please stop watching this, or stop talking to this friend or that friend because they're a bad influence on you, and maybe they really are, and you're like, no. She smokes blunts and listens to music, but, she's so nice. And you're like, no, it's not good for your religion. So there's so many things you can think about on how you can come together as a married couple and try to make each other actually feel happy without being their puppet, because some demands he might make will be absurd, right? If he says, I would like you more if you just dyed your hair blonde, it's like, well, that's kind of weird. That's, obviously there's going to be a vast array, vast context and degree of what it means to be good and how to be a good wife, right? So to think about it, explore it, right? Explore it. That's the fun part about self-examination, is to really see where your shortcomings are and how you can fix that, and if it's possible, and to what degree. Don't become doom and gloom because you weren't perfect the first time, or stuff like that. You can do good, you should want to do good, and it's a great thing to treat someone well. And if he makes mistakes and doesn't appreciate it, don't become a cynical, raving, lunatic, divorced feminist who, wants to take down the patriarchy because she couldn't make her marriage work. Nah, just stay positive. Try again. That's all you can do, really. If someone's business went bankrupt, they don't just start hating all businesses. They open up another one, try again, and learn from their mistakes. Right? Think of it that way. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Join the blog. Take care.